Hey y'all, this is Spirit. They're an androgynous being from a small celestial forest. But more importantly, they're a pal and serve as the protagonist of my game Hollow Runes. But we have a big problem here. Spirit isn't wearing any clothes. So today, all of that changes. Hey all, Kumo here, back with another devlog for Hollow Runes. Hollow Runes is a 3D action RPG, and if you're new here, I highly recommend checking out the last devlog because we dive pretty deep into the beginnings of combat. But like I said in the intro, today we're going to be working on the clothing for our protagonist. So let's go. And before you all say anything, I know that Spirit is a highly admired character by the community, and I agree. So just as a disclaimer, I don't want to alter anything that changes the appeal of our friend. But on that note, there are a couple reasons why I want to add clothing to the character in the first place. Namely, Spirit's naked. It's cold out here. But more serious than that, there's actually story elements tied to the game that influence the reasoning for the character donning an outfit. So to get into it and be completely transparent, I don't like to disclose a lot of the story that I have planned for this game, just because I want players to be able to experience it blindly and see what the game has to offer with their own eyes. But this obviously impacts the reasoning behind my decision, so I want to at least disclose a little bit of info to why Spirit is going to be donning this apparel. Plus, this will all happen in the very intro of the game, so not really spoiler territory. During the player's initial awakening in the village, and after they meet the wide array of celestial beings, Spirit will finally receive their call to arms, which is to explore the land and find their purpose. I know, entirely new concept. However, after the player receives their call to arms and speaks to the village elder, they'll be given their outfit to go out exploring. Something that you should know about this world is that if you're a celestial being, you're immortal within the confines of the celestial village. However, if a celestial being leaves the perimeter of the forest, they become mortal again. And so the outfit given to you by the village elder is made with the sacred materials of the forest and can protect you. So if Spirit were to lose their life during an adventure, they would safely be transported back to the confines of the forest. I think this is a really neat idea because it gives a reason gameplay wise why the player goes back to essentially their home base right after death, as opposed to just a generic game over screen. And then also lore wise, it makes a lot of sense too. And if that forest is making everyone immortal, you're carrying a little piece of that with you. I really hope that you guys like this idea and are interested in seeing how I'm going to be tackling the rest of the story. Now, to get into the meat of this episode, we're going to be talking about my misadventures with creating, rigging, animating, and of course, playtesting all of the clothing ideas I had for Spirit. Firstly, I'd like to talk a little bit about cloth simulation native in Blender. It's a really handy tool for simulating cloth within Blender's engine. So my initial thought was, well great, I use Blender, and how hard can it be to rig something up that just has the cloth sim on it? And oh, how wrong I was. Minutes, hours, what felt like days passed by, and I was still trying my hardest to make the cloth simulation that worked in a fluid way that I intended to. And I know I'm no Blender expert or anything. In fact, most of the 3D models that you see here are my very first steps into using Blender or any 3D animation software. But what I do typically have is tenacity, and I was willing to bury myself into the ground to make this work. So after trial and error, and error, and error, I finally got something that I was okay with, but not 100% loving. Plus all of the shearing that was happening between my character and the clothing animation, it was just not in the cards. So next I said, well, Kumo, Unity also uses a native cloth simulation. So I decided to put a pin on it and try my hand at Unity's cloth simulator. Because you know, it's worth a shot. The way Unity handles cloth simulation is actually pretty intuitive and works for a lot of people. I can list a handful of devs who have used it in their own projects. The problem that I had with Unity's cloth simulation is that it felt very limited and there just wasn't a lot of options for me to tweak in order for it to feel natural. And oh God, the collisions. The collisions would drive me absolutely crazy. Every time I had to readjust anything, it was just an absolute nightmare. So while I do think Unity's cloth simulation is good for certain use cases, for my needs, it just wasn't in the cards. I think something like a flag or a singular mesh that you're using for the cloth sim would work a heck of a lot better, but for me, not today. I was not willing to be beaten by either cloth simulations within Blender or Unity, I was going to press on. And so press on I did. I ended up spending just a wacky amount of time watching Blender tutorials, reading the documentation, all for cloth simulation. And then I was revitalized. I came back hard and fast, and I was ready to get some work done. I noticed a lot of the problems that I was having in the past were due to the topology or the vertices just not lining up in my mesh properly. So I really wanted to take another crack at it, and I started over. When I originally made the cloak for Spirit, I attached a cloth simulation to the entire outfit, and it honestly just wasn't moving the way I wanted it to. So I opted for a different solution. I was gonna keep the cloak as a static mesh and then attach a scarf-like object that would kind of lazily move around in the breeze. This seemed to be working, but I still was having a lot of problems with shearing and just the outfit clipping continuously, having to go back, re-way paint my entire outfit, rinse and repeat. However, along the way, I did decide to create some of the other pieces of clothing that I wanted to add to the character. I'm very inspired by old JRPG protagonists, namely the art for games like Final Fantasy Tactics, the original Dragon Quest, the list goes on. So while originally it was just going to be something like a cloak and a scarf, very minimalistic, I decided to go for a little bit of flair and add metal leggings. Honestly, this is the bit I'm the most proud of. As someone who's newer to Blender, it might be very simple and minimalistic, but for me, I was absolutely over the moon. This was something that I created with my own hands, and it didn't look terrible. But then it was time to go back to my nightmare, the cloth simulation. At this point, it was personal. I needed to show the cloth simulation that it couldn't get the better of me. So I worked and worked and worked and went on an absolute rampage. I pulled out all the stops, used every trick in the book that I knew, but in the end, I gave up. Now I know this story is supposed to have a happy ending, but I could not for the life of me figure out a proper way to make the cloak simulate fluidly and naturally. I would love to hear any suggestions on how to remedy this in the comments below, because I know there has to be an easier way. And here is the completed outfit, all tailored specifically for Spirit. So definitely leave a comment on which one's your favorite, as I'm still deciding. And all my friends in the Discord, I'm gonna be putting a poll up as well, so feel free to vote on your favorite. I was very happy with all the progress that I made, and so I do think that this story has a happy ending. All the progress I made, all the trials and tribulations I faced, it's poetic, really. So I would like to say to you, dear viewer, never give up hope, because even if you don't succeed the first time, or the second time, or even the third time, I'm going on like 20 now, and as you're watching this video, I'm still in the bowels of hell, working on cloth simulation. God, how many times did I say that in one video? Well, not as productive as I wanted it to be, but a successful devlog nonetheless. I still learned a ton of things, and I want to continue moving forward. Again, thank you guys all so much for the support. It all means so much to me. Everyone who watches these videos is just making my life that much better. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you, firstly. And secondly, consider subscribing and liking the video. It really helps me out. And as always, cheers.